On the day I reached my coming-of-age ceremony, Qin Huaiyuan came to annul our engagement. He had fallen in love with my childhood friend. He said that Yue Niang was delicate and lively, and that he would only marry her in this lifetime. To break off the engagement, he knelt in the snow and endured 3 strokes of a thorned branch. Yue Niang held him and cried, saying, "Ah Jiao, please be the good person just this once, and make way for us." I wiped away my tears and smiled as I tore up the marriage contract. "Then, as you wish," I said. A year later, I left for my wedding in a procession of red wedding decorations, but he stopped my palanquin in the street, saying, "The prince's marriage to you is a trap. Only, I truly love you." He regretted it. But I, Tao Ajiao, only walk forward and never look back. "Ma'am, how long has he been kneeling outside?" I asked, wiping my tears and watching the snowflakes growing heavier outside the window after my nap. Zhao Momo sighed, her voice filled with resentment. "Not long. From yesterday to now, it's only been 15 hours. The one kneeling in the yard was Qin Huaiyuan, the heir to the Marquis of Gubei, with whom I had been betrothed since childhood. We were childhood sweethearts for more than 10 years. He arrived early yesterday for my coming-of-age ceremony. I eagerly went to greet him, but what I saw was the marriage contract we had signed 3 years ago. "Ah Jiao, let's break off the engagement," he said, pointing to a small servant carrying a red-lacquered wooden box behind him. "Please take back these things." Inside the box were all the items representing our past: the handkerchief I had embroidered myself, love poems we exchanged, the talisman I had prayed for by climbing 99 steps at the National Defense Temple, and the waist protector I sewed stitch by stitch. Every time he received a gift from me, he would show it off to everyone, proudly saying, "This is from Ah Jiao." But now he didn't want any of it. His arrival broke the festive atmosphere in the yard. The servants, holding red silk and gold wine cups, retreated to the back courtyard, leaving just the 2 of us standing in the center. "Why are you annulling the engagement?" My voice trembled. I could hear the sob in my words. It was the first time in my life I had lost my composure. Qin Huaiyuan remained silent, only looking up at the gray sky. I followed his gaze. The sky had seemed bright this morning, and at that moment, I was full of joy, waiting for my coming-of-age ceremony. After offering my respects, I could choose a good day and marry, spending every day with Huaiyuan. That's why even this cloudy sky seemed to shine. "It's about to snow," Qin Huaiyuan suddenly said after a long silence. "You've always been afraid of the cold but love being in the center of attention. You never listened to my advice and would rush outside to play in the snow, only to return cold and sit by the heater, frowning and sniffling like a poor little thing. Back then, I would roast oranges for you, sweet and warm. After eating, you'd smile." As always, he was reminding me. But now he was going to break off the engagement and still talking about these sentimental words as if he cared. What did that even mean? I sneered. "I, Tao Ajiao, am the legitimate daughter of the Duke's family. Even if I'm annulling the engagement, I'll make sure the reason is clear. This half-hearted insult, I won't accept." Qin Huaiyuan paused for a moment, then softly said, "I've fallen in love with Yue Niang. Ah Jiao, you're a wonderful person, one of the best talents in the capital. Even His Majesty has praised you for embodying the grace of a noble woman. But marrying me would only mean a change from one noble family to another. Life would be no different and lack vitality. But Yue Niang is different. She understands my ambitions, and she always has so many new ideas. Every moment with her is filled with novelty. I look forward to tomorrow, always wanting the sun to rise earlier so I can see her again. She doesn't follow the rules. She's not like other noble girls. But that uniqueness is the most precious thing. I've made up my mind. I will marry no one but her." The handkerchief I had been tightly holding fell to the ground. It was the handkerchief I lost that year during a trip to Lishan. Yue Niang, to comfort me, personally embroidered it for me. Her name and mine were stitched on it, and she had smiled, saying, "Ah Jiao, you look best when you smile. As long as you like it, I'll embroider your wedding handkerchief and your child's belly band." Would you like that? How could it be her? I didn't know how long I had been standing in the yard, but when the snowflakes began to fall and melted on my nose, the coolness brought me back to my senses. Zhao Momo rushed over with an umbrella, followed by Kei Mei, who wrapped a fox fur cloak around me. Miss, it's snowing. It's cold outside. We should go inside. As I turned to leave, Qin Huaiyuan called out to me. Ah Jiao, I'm sorry. We won't be happy if we force the marriage. Take back the marriage contract, and let's part ways peacefully. The same person who just warned me to be careful of catching a cold was now only concerned about whether I agreed to the annulment. Indeed, words of concern are the cheapest. I ignored him and went inside, instructing Zhao Momo to ask my father to come to the front yard. The Duke's family had strict rules, and it was forbidden for servants to gossip about their master's affairs. Therefore, no word of what had just happened had left my courtyard without my permission. Meanwhile, in the front yard, my father was likely discussing the wedding date with Lord Qin, and my mother was probably hosting the Marquis's wife, talking about when we would visit the Empress to express our gratitude. Less than a quarter of an hour later, Lord Qin came rushing into my courtyard, holding a knife. You ungrateful wretch, are you drunk? What nonsense are you saying? You dare annul the engagement? He shouted, then struck Qin Huaiyuan's back with the knife handle. I watched from the window. The blow wasn't light, but Qin Huaiyuan's expression didn't change at all. When we were young and hadn't matured, our elders arranged the engagement. But all these years, I have always treated Ajiao like a sister. Now that I have someone I truly love, I cannot marry her. Upon hearing this, Madame Qin fainted in anger. Lord Qin, furious, ordered the servants to bring thorny branches and began to beat Qin Huaiyuan. With every strike, he asked, "Do you know your mistake?" They broke 3 branches and Qin Huaiyuan's back was left bloodied and bruised, but he never cried out in pain. In the past, when he had a small scratch, he would always come to me to let me blow on it. I looked at the bloodstains on the snow outside, and they stood out so clearly, hurting my eyes, and my heart ached. Qin Huaiyuan's love for Yue Niang was so deep. But when had he and Yue Niang begun? I had no idea. I closed my eyes and tried to search through my memories. When Muniang was 6 years old, she fell seriously ill. Her father came to ask my mother for help, and after my mother called in the imperial doctor to cure her, Muniang stayed with the Tao family, living and eating with me, treated the same. But after that illness, Muniang often suffered from headaches. She visited many doctors and took numerous medicines, but nothing seemed to work. During her headaches, she would talk to herself, and when upset, it was like she was arguing with someone. After taking medicine and sleeping, she would wake up as if nothing had happened. Mother often said it might have been the illness that made Muniang unusually mature for her age, calm and steady in her actions. She had met the Empress twice with me, and even the Empress praised her for being gentle, quiet, and graceful. Muniang always knew that I was betrothed to Qin Huaiyuan. Every time he visited the Duke's residence, she would avoid him, either hiding in her room embroidering or running errands in the streets under various pretexts. She always said, "It's already a great fortune for me to stay at the Duke's residence. If I get too close to the young master, there will be too much gossip." This Muniang was a far cry from the one Qin Huaiyuan spoke of. Thinking carefully, it must have been after that incident when she fell into the water 6 months ago that she began to change. It was just the beginning of summer, and the lake was still cold, but Muniang insisted on taking a boat ride to the center of the lake. Since she rarely liked water, I had someone follow her closely. But they couldn't keep up, and she slipped off the boat and fell into the lake. After being rescued and burning for 2 days, when she woke up, it was as if she had become a completely different person. The Muniang who once hated the hustle and bustle now attended 2 gatherings a day. At a poetry gathering, she surprised everyone by facing off with 6 poets, her words flowing effortlessly, shifting between bold, delicate, and melancholic styles. Everyone was amazed. "Ah Jiao, your household has such a talented woman. Why have you kept her hidden from us?" I smiled and made light of the praise, but in my heart, I was puzzled. Muniang liked embroidery and playing the zither, but she disliked poetry and literature. How could she suddenly change so much? After several rounds of poetry, Yue Niang raised a glass of colored glaze and began singing a tune I had never heard before. Who says women are not as good as men? Looking at the drinking capacity of today's young masters, they might not be able to compare with me. Yue Niang leaned against the railing, smiling sweetly at everyone, quickly stirring their competitive spirit as they joined her in drinking. Qin Huayuan furrowed his brow and whispered in my ear, "She has no shame, doing all this and embarrassing the Duke's household." I laughed and covered for Yue Niang. She was upset after falling into the water, and now she needs to vent. In mid-June, I accompanied my mother on a pilgrimage, staying in the mountains for a month. When I returned to the Duke's residence, Yue Niang had become the most sought-after guest at every banquet in the capital. Even the invitation to the Gu Bei Ho's flower viewing banquet was sent to her alone. Yue Niang had always avoided the Gu Bei Ho's residence in the past. But that day, after she went to the Ho residence, she seemed to know the place so well, walking straight to the lotus pond. When Qin Huayuan saw us, he smiled and greeted Yue Niang. "I knew you would come to the flower viewing banquet today. I've hired the best musicians. I'm curious to hear what new song you'll sing." I froze. In the month I was gone, they had become so familiar with each other. Yue Niang covered her mouth and laughed, glancing at me. "Not at all. Today, your beloved is back, so I'll stay away from you." Qin Huayuan's eyes flashed with a trace of disappointment. Then he turned to me with a smile. "How is the mountain?" "I've been busy with the army and missed coming down to get you." I felt a pang of sourness. He hadn't had time to see me, but he had time to attend gatherings with Yue Niang. That day, Yue Niang ignored Qin Huayuan as usual, but he was different. He seemed distant, often lost in thought, needing several attempts for anyone to catch his attention. It seemed that from that moment, he had begun to develop feelings for Yue Niang. "Miss, the time for your coming-of-age ceremony has arrived." Zhao Momo gently pulled me from my thoughts. Behind her stood an old maid my mother had brought from the palace to help me change into my coming-of-age gown. I forced a smile and prepared for the ceremony. No matter what, I couldn't let Qin Huayuan ruin such an important day for me. Qin Huayuan was still kneeling in the courtyard, his posture upright, his eyes full of determination as he looked at me. "Jiao, the Duke said that if we are to break the engagement, you must give your consent. Today, I will kneel here and apologize until you are satisfied." I stepped over the blood-stained snow, not looking back as I made my way to the main hall. Breaking off the engagement wasn't the problem. What mattered was that I couldn't lower my stance. I smiled, accepted the gifts, listened to the opera, and watched the fireworks, sitting with my family and guests to drink. When the banquet ended, my father quietly reminded me, "Jiao, you are the daughter of the Tao family. The Tao family never shies away from anything. If you wish to break the engagement, you can remain unmarried for the rest of your life, and you will be the most respected unmarried lady in the Duke's household. If you don't wish to break the engagement, I will drag Qin Huayuan by force and have him marry you. He won't take a step out of the Tao residence without your approval. Today, you must be tired, go rest. Any matters can wait for tomorrow." I've always listened to my father's advice, so I went to sleep. The next morning, I woke up to find it was already noon. Looking out the window at the heavy snow, I asked Zhao Momo, "Momo, how long has he been kneeling outside?" Momo spoke with bitterness. "Not long, just 15 hours, from yesterday until now." Looking at myself in the mirror, my eyes swollen from crying, I remembered last night, having drunk much wine and shed many tears. My mother had cried with me several times, stroking my hair and comforting me. "Jiao, don't cry. I'll find you a better husband, the best in the world." It was my mother who had misjudged people all these years, raising a wolf in sheep's clothing. Now, the wolf my mother spoke of was knocking at the door of my courtyard. "Jiao, please meet with me. We grew up together. You can't even give me a chance to explain?" I waved my hand, signaling Zhao Momo, and the young maid at the door went to open it. As soon as Yue Niang entered the courtyard, she saw Qin Huayuan and screamed as she rushed over, throwing herself into his arms, crying. I stood in the corridor, wrapped in a cloak, watching them. Ah Jiao, it's all my fault. I seduced Huayuan. You can punish me however you want, but don't blame him. He's always been kind to you, and never wronged you. How can you bear to let him kneel here, all night? Yue Niang sobbed pitifully, while Qin Huayuan held her tightly, comforting her. The more she took the blame on herself, the more Qin Huayuan would pity her, and the more his hatred for me would grow. This wasn't the Yue Niang I grew up with. My Yue Niang would have said, Ah Jiao, I'll protect you for the rest of your life. When you marry and have a big, healthy child, even when you grow old and lose your teeth, I'll still protect you. Yue Niang rarely smiles at people, but she likes to smile at me. She smiles when she eats the apricot flower pastry I make, when she drinks the peach blossom wine I brew, and even when she talks about us becoming old ladies someday. Suddenly, I remembered after that flower viewing banquet at the Gu Bei Marquis' mansion, when Qin Huayuan came to the Duke's residence to see me. I was flipping through the accounts and he sighed. Ah Jiao, you listen too much to your parents and lack your own thoughts and opinions. You clearly don't enjoy looking at the accounts, but you force yourself to learn. You should be like Yue Niang and do what you love. Live according to your own nature. You're no different from all the other noble young ladies. No sooner had he finished speaking than Yue Niang, the very person he mentioned, came in with a bird cage. Master Chen sent me a pair of birds. They can speak human language. Want to hear them? The birds chirped twice and then said, oppose arranged marriages, advocate for the freedom of love. Qin Huayuan asked her, what is an arranged marriage? Yue Niang smiled and looked at us both. You two are the epitome of that. Your marriage was decided long ago, but back then did you even understand what love is? Your marriage is a strong union between the Duke's residence and the Marquis' residence. No one ever asked if you truly love each other. You're like two puppets sacrificed for the growth of your families. I have to admit, what Yue Niang said made sense, but between Qin Huayuan and me, we were mutually fond of each other. Our marriage was based on compatibility, with both families having deep connections. What was wrong with that? What is the freedom of love then? Qin Huayuan continued. Yue Niang set down the birdcage and counted on her fingers. As a grown adult, you should have the right to pursue your true love. Things like family background, status, dowries, houses, land, and knowledge should never be what binds you from being with the one you truly love. I understood what she meant. If you truly love someone, you should selfishly live for yourself. But that wasn't something I could do. However, Qin Huayuan nodded, clearly in agreement with Yue Niang's words. Perhaps from that moment on, Qin Huayuan and I began to drift apart. In the yard, Yue Niang's crying was interrupted by K. Mei. Miss, the Crown Prince sent a congratulatory gift. He said he only returned to the capital today and missed your coming-of-age ceremony, and he deeply regrets it. K. Mei presented the gift box and added, the Crown Prince specifically instructed that this gift should be viewed outdoors, as it looks more exquisite. I opened the gift box to find a jade rui. The translucent green jade handle had a white jade inlay, and there were plum blossoms blooming in the snow, with a small inscription next to it. I wish Ajiao all things go according to her heart. I recognized the white jade. It was the one always worn by Crown Prince Zhou Yi, the eldest grandson of the late emperor. When he was born, the late emperor gave him the most precious piece of jade in the palace. Every noble child knew of this jade. Now this piece of jade was in my hands. Qin Huayuan naturally recognized it too. He loosened his hold on Yue Niang's hand and half-clenched his fist, looking at me. I smiled and told K. Mei, it's very thoughtful of the Crown Prince to remember that I was born during the first snowfall when the plum blossoms were in full bloom. Please thank His Highness for me. This is the best coming-of-age gift I've received. After that, I turned to go back to my room, but Qin Huayuan suddenly spoke up. Ah Jiao, although Zhou Yi is the Crown Prince, his foundation is not solid. He is trying to take advantage of this opportunity, using you to win the Duke's support. Don't fall for it. I turned around and gave him a glance, then smiled. Even if I fall for it, what does it have to do with you? Truth be told, While I wasn't as close with Zhou Yi as I was with Qin Huaiyuan, I had known him since childhood. My father is the maternal nephew of the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager liked me, so I often went to the palace when I was little. Zhou Yi, being the eldest grandson, was raised in the Empress Dowager's palace. Every time I went to the palace, he would take me to the Imperial Garden to catch butterflies, to the Yulio Spring to catch fish. When I practiced calligraphy, he would nap beside me, and when he woke up, he would be the first to ask for food. Speaking of food, Zhou Yi had a deep knowledge of it. For fruits and vegetables, he preferred minimal processing to preserve their original taste, making them feel as if you could sense the breeze over the fields. For meats, he paid attention to the timing of the cooking. Too tender or too dry were both unacceptable. The Empress Dowager dotes on this eldest grandson of hers, and wherever he stayed, the royal kitchens would be the best in the entire palace. As a result, Zhou Yi had been spoiled, always eating and rarely moving. He would sweat just after running a few steps, and the palace maids would rush to bring him sour plum juice and snacks, holding umbrellas and fanning him. I've always liked everything beautiful to the extreme. To be blunt, I simply didn't like Zhou Yi, who was chubby and had no elegance, and who was extremely spoiled. On the other hand, Qin Huaiyuan, who was independent and strong from a young age, left a much better impression on me. After signing the marriage contract with Qin Huaiyuan at 12, I rarely went to the palace. That same year, Zhou Yi went south to Yuhang with a tutor and stayed there for 3 years. I didn't expect him to return today. I placed the jade rui in the most prominent spot in my room, knowing that Zhou Yi was reminding me not to forget my identity. Today, he sent me this gift, helping me restore the face I had lost. With my prestigious maternal family, if this engagement continued to be dragged on, it would only bring shame to the Duke's residence, making it seem like I was clinging to Qin Huaiyuan. It would be better to let go now and preserve our dignity. As for Yue Niang, I treated her as a sister and had never wronged her. Since things had come to this point, there was no need to continue our interactions. I would consider the years of friendship as food for a dog I could never tame. I instructed Kei Mei to pack up everything related to Qin Huaiyuan in the room, wipe away the last tear, and walk out with the marriage contract. When Yue Niang saw me, her emotions became agitated. Ajiao, I was wrong. I apologize, I'll kowtow to you. I just beg you to spare Huaiyuan. He's still injured. If you don't spare him, he'll die. Yue Niang cried out as she broke free from Qin Huaiyuan's arms and desperately kowtowed to me on the snow, each bow seemingly done with great force, but not a single snowflake touched her forehead. While kowtowing and crying, she shouted, Ajiao, I know you hate us and want Huaiyuan to die. If it will make you happy, if you can spare him, I will let you do whatever you want with my life. Ajiao, I was wrong. Don't punish Huaiyuan anymore. He's been beaten. He's in pain. She cried until she collapsed. Qin Huaiyuan reacted quickly and caught her, holding her tightly in his arms with a pained expression. Yue Niang, I'm not in pain. I'm not afraid. As long as I'm with you, I would endure even 3 more lashes of the thorny branches. What are you begging her for? You've kowtowed to her for so long. Has she shown any sign of compassion? She doesn't care about you. But those thorny lashes weren't for me. The apology and the kowtow weren't initiated by me. I was the one who had been hurt by them. Yet in their words, I had become the villain. They knelt and embraced in the snow, resentfully looking at me in the corridor. They were so deeply immersed in the act that they even forgot that I was the one who had been wronged. I suddenly felt very grateful to Zhou Yi for waking me up. When facing such heartless people, cutting losses quickly was the best course of action. I slowly walked over to Qin Huaiyuan, tore up the marriage contract, and threw it in his face. Take what you want and get out of the Duke's residence. From now on, we go our separate ways and never cross paths again. After I said that, Kei Mei ordered the servants to bring out the trunks they had just organized, opening them to reveal the items Qin Huaiyuan had given me. Our young lady's future is ahead of her. The past is better left behind, but since the heir of the Marquis sent these gifts, we must show respect to the Marquis family. Kei Mei said coldly, standing behind me. "Here, you. Take these trunks to the back courtyard and burn everything. Burn away the disgrace from Our Lady's past. From now on, her life will be full of opportunities." Upon hearing this, Qin Huayuan's expression darkened as he glared at Kei Mei. Kei Mei was unbothered and continued, "You all, carefully return the heir's gifts to the marquis residence. Be careful not to damage them. Our duke's residence is fine, but the Taizi's jade rui is worth more than all of this. After all, the heir has a new love and has to send flattering gifts. Just consider it Our Lady's kindness. Heir, since the trunk is already open, please take a look and make sure there's nothing left out." After hearing these words, Qin Huayuan managed to keep his composure, but Moon Lady cursed. "Do you take me for a beggar? She, Tao Jiao, doesn't want this stuff, so why should I have it?" Kei Mei smiled. "Although I am a servant, I am still someone who stands beside the young lady. Unlike some people who live off others and pretend to serve like a proper young lady, all while plotting to steal men." Moon Lady, enraged, immediately tried to slap Kei Mei, but the women behind her quickly restrained her. Kei Mei continued, "In one incense stick's time, if you haven't left the Duke's residence, I'll have someone bind you and throw you out, so everyone can see what kind of woman you are, stealing men like a dirty fool. Now get out." With a wave of her hand, the servants began pulling Moon Lady away. Moon Lady screamed desperately, "Tao Jiao, if you have the guts, do it yourself. Don't just stand there like a wooden post, silent." Kei Mei chased after her, spitting in Moon Lady's face. "You think you deserve the young lady to speak up for you? Bah!" In the next moment, Qin Huayuan lunged forward, striking Kei Mei. Though a group of people quickly restrained him, Kei Mei was still forced to stagger back 2 steps from the pain. I picked up a long sword from one of the trunks behind me and immediately stabbed it into Qin Huayuan's back. As he held Moon Lady, the sword pierced his flesh. "Before you touch anyone around me again, think carefully." Kei Mei's left shoulder was injured by Qin Huayuan's strike, leaving a bruise. Zhao Ma, muttering about why Kei Mei even bothered to argue with that wretched woman, was treating her wound. Kei Mei snorted. "Should I have let the young lady argue with her? Our Lady is a noble daughter. How could she lower her status for that vulgar woman? If the lady is insulted and I can't protect her, then I am useless." Then she laughed. "Did you see inside? When has the heir of the Marquis ever been this pathetic? Our Lady is the legitimate daughter of a military family. Today, she spared him some grace, only giving him a flesh wound. Otherwise, that sword would have pierced those 2 filthy lovers." The old maid looked at me with some worry. "Miss, the Tao and Qin families are old family friends. Everyone knows the Marquis heir left the Duke's residence covered in blood. I'm afraid." I twirled the jade rui in my hand and smiled. "What's there to be afraid of? I want everyone to know that if you dare to disrespect the Duke's residence and humiliate Tao Jiao, no matter who you are, you won't get away with it." At that moment, a maid from my mother's side came to fetch me. "The palace has sent a decree, and the madam invites the young lady to listen to it." Upon entering the front hall, I saw that the queen's personal attendant had come to invite me. "The Empress Dowager misses you, and she asks you to come to the palace to visit her." Once we entered the palace, before I could finish my greeting, I was helped to my feet. "It's been half a year since you last visited the palace, Jiao. Not only the Empress Dowager misses you, but I do as well. Yesterday was your coming-of-age ceremony, and the Empress Dowager was very concerned. However, due to the banquet at the Duke's residence, she could only wait until today to give you another coming-of-age celebration. Only then did I notice that the hall was filled with the noble women of the capital, each wearing a smile and nodding at the Empress. The entire capital must have heard about Qin Huayuan leaving the Duke's residence covered in blood. At this critical moment, the Empress invited all the influential families to attend a banquet for me, clearly signaling to everyone, "Don't speak carelessly. Tao Jiao is backed by the royal family." As we entered the Lufeng Pavilion, the Empress Dowager was already sitting on a couch, gazing at the snow. When she saw me, she was delighted. Jiao, come to your grandmother. The snow view today is so beautiful. I'd like to hear Hong Mei Tan, but the palace musicians don't play it well. I've been waiting for you. After I performed a piece of Hong Mei Tan, before I could even stand up to speak, I heard a clear male voice. Jiao's playing is even more proficient. Her skill is so high that only the grand tutor could surpass her. Following the sound, I saw a young man with sharp brows, deep eyes, and a handsome face, wearing a dark blue embroidered cloak. His long eyelashes were dusted with a layer of snow. He looked familiar, but I couldn't recall where I had seen him before. Looking at his rosy lips and those lively, affectionate eyes, he was undoubtedly handsome. While I was contemplating, the queen's scolding voice reached my ears. "Why are you not holding an umbrella? What if you catch a cold?" At the same time, the surrounding palace attendants had gathered around him, removing his heavy cloak, offering a clean handkerchief, and gently brushing the snow from his eyelashes. I stared at him, utterly stunned. Could this be Zhou Yi? The chubby Zhou Yi, with eyes so small they seemed like mere slits. How could he possibly have these bright, star-like eyes? But in the next moment, as he spoke, my suspicion was confirmed. "Mother, I am not so delicate. During the 3 years I spent in Yue Niang with the imperial preceptor, practicing swordplay in the rain and meditating in the snow, I've grown accustomed to these conditions." I was completely dumbfounded.
It really was Zhou Yi.
Jiao, try this fish soup. You won't find this in the north. This shrimp is specially brought back alive, steamed to retain its natural flavor. Don't underestimate this stir-fried pumpkin vine. Did you know pumpkin vines can be used as an ingredient? At the banquet, Zhou Yi sat beside me, chattering nonstop. All the familiar memories from 3 years ago rushed back. Yes, this handsome young man was indeed Zhou Yi. Still the same, always enjoying food, but now he had successfully lost weight. "Thank you, Prince. I know that all these arrangements, including the jade rui, are meant to bring me honor. I truly appreciate your thoughtfulness," I said, trying to cut off his ongoing food discussion. Zhou Yi fluttered his lashes and smiled. "This banquet was arranged at the behest of my grandmother. She already intended to help you, but I felt it wasn't enough. In my heart, you are the best woman, deserving of the best treatment. So I asked father to arrange this banquet at Lufeng Pavilion." Zhou Yi's sincerity was evident on his face, but my heart felt a pang of sadness. In the past, someone had gone to such lengths for me, but hearts change, and in an instant, everything could turn upside down. This banquet effectively quelled the gossip of the past few days. Everyone praised me as a talented woman, and the song, Hong Mei Tan, won the queen's favor. Everything at home returned to normal. Father, as usual, returned from court and shared interesting stories. Zhou Yi, after 3 years of disciplined study with the imperial preceptor, had truly changed. Not only had he rid himself of his arrogant habits, but now he proposed many statecraft strategies. Today in the court, he even argued with the scholars, leaving the commander of the Western barracks unable to lift his head. Today, the government officials reported that several dozen women had accused the soldiers of the Western barracks of attempting to divorce their wives in order to pay for courtesans' release. Given the large number of complaints and the potential impact on the military's morale, His Majesty had already instructed the Crown Prince to investigate the matter. The Western barracks was where Qin Huaiyuan was stationed. With his position and the support of the Ho family, he had managed to rise to the position of deputy commander. I had an unsettling feeling that this matter was somehow connected to him. Sure enough, the next day, Zhou Yi came to find me. He was pacing back and forth in the study, fists clenched. These soldiers are truly despicable. When there's no war, they should be training. Instead, they spend their time in brothels and bring their mistresses back to their homes. Since Qin Huaiyuan broke off the engagement with you, they seem to have been encouraged, and now they're all seeking divorces from their wives. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. Zhou Yi smiled. Jiao, you understand me. I suspect this is related to Qin Huaiyuan, and I want you to help me investigate. With your status, it will be easier for you to get the wives to speak out. Zhou and I secretly visited the homes of several soldiers, and we found that the changes in their behavior had started around June and July. Those who once went straight home after court now frequented brothels, even bringing their mistresses to their homes for pleasure. They say I am their last choice, that now they must live for themselves. The wives were crying as they spoke. I scolded him. If you're going to find someone, at least choose a woman from a respectable family. Why degrade me with a courtesan? He replied, what does true love have to do with status? My family has been scholars for generations. If I were to be divorced for courtesan, my father would surely die of grief. Listening to this, I understood everything. These words matched exactly what Yue Niang had said that day. When I combined the timing and Zhou Yi's mention that the soldiers had been emboldened after the engagement broke off with Qin Huaiyuan, I was certain this was all connected to Yue Niang. Zhou Yi and I went straight to the Gubei home mansion. With the crown prince by my side, no one dared to stop us. As soon as we pushed open the gate, we heard Yue Niang's laughter inside. Huaiyuan, stop it. Your wounds haven't healed. If you want me, it will hurt your injury. Zhou Yi's face darkened, and he covered my ears. We'll come back another day. But I didn't want to wait. I had to settle the score with Yue Niang. I could overlook what had happened before for the sake of old relationships, but now it was affecting the army. As a daughter of the Tao family, I couldn't just stand by. I was born at the border, raised surrounded by weapons in the Duke's mansion. My family's generations of service in the military had brought us peace, and I wouldn't let Yue Niang disrupt that. Remembering the wives I had seen earlier, wiping tears from their faces, and the children asking their mothers, Mom, does father no longer want us? I became even more furious. The children were innocent, and the wives were innocent. I gently pushed Zhou Yi's hand away and walked into the courtyard. Zhou Yi no longer stopped me but hurried ahead, kicking open the door to the room. Yue Niang's shrill scream exposed the entire scandal before our eyes. Yue Niang was wearing a belly band, frantically grabbing a thin veil to cover herself. She pointed at Zhou Yi in shame and anger.
Who are you?
What kind of lowly person are you, barging into the mansion of the son of the Duke? How dare you? Zhou Yi stood at the door with an upright posture, coldly watching her, not responding until his attendants had secured the yard and reported, Your Highness, everything is ready. If I wasn't mistaken, when Yue Niang heard the title Crown Prince, her previous anger had turned into a flirtatious shyness. She fixed her hair, looked at Zhou Yi with soft eyes, and said, I didn't know it was your highness. Please forgive me. As she spoke, the thin veil she had been using to cover herself slowly fell. Zhou Yi didn't respond but instead coldly looked at Qin Huaiyuan, whose face had also darkened. I've come today to ask the Duke and this concubine about something. Qin Huaiyuan snorted coldly. Your Highness is the Crown Prince, so noble. You can seal up a courtyard as you please. But I am just the deputy commander. What can I say? However, Yue Niang is my beloved, and she will be my wife. Your Highness, calling her a concubine is an insult. As I was thinking, the Queen's scolding voice came through. Why aren't you holding an umbrella? What if you get sick? At the same time, the surrounding palace maids rushed over, helping him out of his heavy cloak, offering clean, warm towels and gently brushing off the layer of snow on his eyelashes. I stared at him, eyes wide. Could this really be Zhou Yi? The chubby Zhou Yi with eyes that barely had any slit. How could he possibly have such bright, star-like eyes? But in the next moment, his words confirmed my guess. Mother, I'm not as delicate as you think. In the 3 years I spent in Yuhang with the Grand Tutor, I practiced swordsmanship in the rain and meditated in the snow. In the summer, I read books while sweating under the fan. I've long gotten used to it. I was left speechless, completely shocked.
It really was Zhou Yi.
Ah, Jiao, sister, try this fish soup. It's something you can't find in the north. This is live shrimp that I personally brought back. After steaming, the shrimp retains its natural flavor. Don't underestimate these stir-fried pumpkin vines. You didn't expect this, did you? Pumpkin vines can also be made into a dish. During the meal, Zhou Yi sat beside me, chatting nonstop, and all those familiar memories from 3 years ago came rushing back. Yes, this handsome young man was indeed Yue. Still so fond of food, but having successfully lost weight. Thank you, Prince. I know that everything you did today, including sending the Jade Rui, is to help me save face. I truly appreciate your intentions, I said, trying to interrupt his ongoing talk about food. Yue fluttered his eyelashes and smiled. Today's banquet was arranged by my grandmother, who wanted to help you. But I felt it wasn't enough. You are the best woman in my heart, and you deserve the best treatment. So, I went to ask father and arranged for the banquet to be held at the Lufeng Pavilion. Zhou Yi's face was full of sincerity, but my heart felt a pang of sadness. Once, there were others who put this much thought into me. But hearts change, and everything can turn upside down in an instant. This banquet had completely silenced the rumors of the past 2 days. Everyone praised me as a talented woman, and my performance of Red Plum Sai won the favor of the Empress Dowager. At home, everything returned to normal. My father was still the same, returning from court and telling us amusing stories. Yue, having followed the grand tutor for 3 years, had truly undergone a transformation. Not only had he overcome his previous arrogant habits, but he had also proposed many strategies for governing the country. Today, in the court, he even debated fiercely with the scholars and left the commander of the Western camp speechless. Today, the government office received reports from dozens of women accusing the soldiers of the Western camp who were trying to divorce their wives to pay for the redemption of women in the brothels. The matter was serious, affecting military morale, and His Majesty had ordered the Crown Prince to investigate. The Western camp was where Qin Huaiyuan was stationed. Through his position in the Marquis family and his own capabilities, he had even earned the position of deputy commander. I couldn't help but feel that this matter must be related to him. Sure enough, the next day, Zhou Yi came to see me. He paced back and forth in the study, his fists clenched. These soldiers are truly detestable. Now that peace has come and there's no war, they don't focus on military training but instead indulge in alcohol and women. Since Qin Huaiyuan called off the engagement with you, they seem to have been emboldened and are all trying to divorce their wives. What do you need me to do? I asked. Zhou Yi looked at me and smiled. Ah, Jiao, you understand me. I suspect this matter is related to Qin Huaiyuan, and I want you to help me investigate. With your status, it will be easier for those women to speak up. Zhou Yi and I secretly visited a few soldiers' households and discovered that their changes all seemed to have started around June or July. Those who had always gone home after court were now frequenting the brothels and even bringing their lovers home. He says I'm the only choice for him now, that he wants to live for himself. The wives said tearfully. I scolded him, telling him to at least find a woman from a respectable family, not shame me with a prostitute. He responded, saying that true love doesn't care about status. My family has been a scholarly one for generations. If I were divorced for a prostitute, my father would probably die from the shock. Listening to this, I pieced things together, recognizing the connection with what Yue Niang had said that day. Taking the timing into account, along with Zhou Yi's mention of Qin Huaiyuan emboldening them after the broken engagement, I concluded that Yue Niang must be behind this. Zhou Yi and I headed straight to the Gu Bei Marquis residence. With the Crown Prince by my side, no one dared to stop us. As we pushed open Qin Huaiyuan's courtyard door, we heard Yue Niang's laughter from inside. Huaiyuan, stop playing around, your injury isn't healed yet. If you want me, it will make your wound worse. Zhou Yi's face darkened, and he covered my ears with his hand. We'll come back another day. But I didn't want to wait any longer. I had to settle the score with Yue Niang. I could let go of what had happened that day because of our past relationship, but now it was affecting the military, and as the daughter of the Tao family, I couldn't just sit by. I was born in the borderlands, raised in a military family, and my family had fought for the peace we enjoyed today. I couldn't let Yue Niang shake it all. When I thought of the way those women were crying and their children asking, "Mother, does father not want us anymore?" I was even angrier. The children were innocent, The wives were innocent. I gently pushed Zhou Yi's hand away and walked into the courtyard. Zhou Yi didn't stop me, but quickly walked ahead, kicked open the door, and Yue Niang's scream exposed the entire scene in front of us. Yue Niang, wearing only a belly band, hastily grabbed a thin veil to cover herself and angrily pointed at Zhou Yi. Who do you think you are? You're nothing but a lowly, disrespectful thing. This is the courtyard of the Marquis' son, not a place for you to barge into. Zhou Yi stood at the door, coldly looking at Yue Niang, saying nothing until his attendants had sealed off the courtyard and reporting to the crown prince. Everything is ready. If I wasn't mistaken, when Yue Niang heard the title Crown Prince, her previous indignation shifted to flirtation. She adjusted her hair, gave Zhou Yi a soft, affectionate look, and sweetly said, "I didn't realize it was His Royal Highness. Please forgive me." As she spoke, the thin veil she was holding slid down. Zhou Yi ignored her and coldly turned his gaze to Qin Huaiyuan, who was also looking grim. "I'm here today to ask the Marquis and his concubine about something." Qin Huaiyuan scoffed. "Your Highness is the Crown Prince, how noble. You can close the courtyard with a word. I'm just a deputy commander. What can I say? But Yue Niang is my beloved, and she will be my wife in the future. For you to call her a concubine is an insult." Before Qin Huaiyuan could say anything more, Zhou Yi responded without hesitation. "Until there is a formal marriage with the 3 rights, anything done before is considered a concubine." Qin Huaiyuan was stunned into silence. These past few days, I've been holding on to anger, not because of Qin Huaiyuan's annulment, but because of Yue Niang. I still don't understand how someone can suddenly change overnight and become so unfamiliar. Now, I understand. My Yue Niang has most likely been replaced by the person standing in front of me.
Why?
Just because I am the sole daughter of the Duke's household, and you are the daughter of a 6th grade official. Facing this counterfeit, I need not show any mercy. The more she values her family background, the deeper I will twist the knife in her heart." Yue Niang snorted coldly. "You just know how to get lucky at birth. You noble families have the best resources, the most money, and the most comfortable lives. Can you see the common people with your eyes? You are born with everything, living a life of pleasure, whining about nothing. You're just a bunch of high-sounding trash." I couldn't help but feel astonished. This impostor actually dared to say such things in front of the crown prince. Before I could finish my thoughts, one of the nannies behind Zhou Yi stepped forward and slapped Yue Niang again, and the other side of her face swelled up. "Speak another word, and I'll stitch your mouth shut," the nanny warned, standing next to Yue Niang. Yue Niang froze in fear, not daring to move. Since she didn't understand, I decided to be kind today and explain things to her. I knew that the words I was about to say would certainly spread, and that would be a good thing. It would help clear the minds of those she had incited. "You think the Duke's wealth is just handed down? My great-grandfather was originally a pawnshop owner. When the emperor was ineffective, and during the time of war and suffering, he returned all the items he had pawned and distributed money and food to his neighbors for survival. Afterward, he sold the pawnshop, bought weapons and horses, recruited soldiers, and fought off the corrupt officials who were bullying the commoners. He followed Emperor Taizu all the way to the capital, killed the useless emperor, and established the Liang dynasty. This story might sound simple, but it took him 12 years, suffering from injuries and surviving numerous battles before he earned the title of Duke. My grandfather inherited his legacy and guarded the borders for 30 years, facing the northern winds and fighting countless battles to secure the borders of Liang. In the end, to protect his soldiers, he died on the battlefield, riddled with arrows, but still never knelt before the enemy. He was buried at the border and never saw the flowering trees of his hometown again. My father was born at the border, raised there, and at the age of 15, he took over border defense. For 15 years, no foreign country dared to invade Liang. The emperor, recognizing the family's long history of service to the country, summoned my father back to the capital for a few years of a comfortable life. But even back in the capital, my father never relaxed his vigilance, continuing his training and troop inspections every year. You only see the glory of the Duke's household, but you don't know it was earned with blood and flesh. You only know I am the legitimate daughter of the Duke's household, enjoying luxury, but you don't know I've set up 3 relief centers in the capital, helping the poor, building schools for children, and teaching young people trades like carpentry and blacksmithing. You don't know that every year during the holidays, I visit the families of soldiers stationed at the borders. You certainly don't know that every year, the rewards the government gives to the Tao family are used for border construction and to improve the lives of soldiers' families. The Tao family's foundation has been built through generations of hard work. There has never been any nobility that was freely given. Oh, by the way, I almost forgot. It was your father who came to my mother, seeking her recommendation to get his current position. So, if you want to compare family backgrounds, what's the problem? Yue Niang sat silently on the floor, her expression blank. I took a sip of tea to clear my throat, then continued. I'll ask you again. Why did you incite the soldiers to divorce their wives? This time, Yue Niang became animated. Everyone has the right to pursue true love. Since their parents arranged their marriages, now they should be able to take control of their own lives. If it's not the right person, they should say goodbye and break up decisively to avoid long-term suffering. Isn't that correct? Is there a law in Liang prohibiting the pursuit of true love? Isn't it fair for everyone to treat their feelings equally? No wonder the soldiers were persuaded by her. They're men, and they don't have to bear much responsibility. Even if they divorce, they can easily remarry. With Yue Niang's argument for justice as a shield for their desires and the example of Qin Huaiyuan's successful annulment, it's no surprise that they all rushed to divorce their wives. Yue Niang, do you know that after my annulment, to regain my dignity, the Empress Dowager arranged a coming-of-age ceremony for me to silence the rumors? I asked, looking at Yue Niang. She rolled her eyes, but Zhou Yi, standing beside me, looked worriedly at me. I smiled at him, signaling that it was nothing and that there was nothing shameful about this matter. I am the legitimate daughter of the Duke's household, and even I need the Empress Dowager to intervene to settle things. But what about women who are not as fortunate as I am? Do you know who are the most frequent visitors to the nunneries outside the capital? They are the women who have been divorced. Without a family to support them, with nowhere to go, they have to do menial labor, but they are alone and subjected to humiliation. The gossip from their neighbors can drown them. So, they can only go to the nunneries, where they can survive in peace. Clearly, Yue Niang didn't know any of this. She stared blankly, lost in thought. Earlier, you said I don't understand the hardships of ordinary people. I think you saw it too, and you must have thought about where they would end up. You surely have a way to silence the rumors and help them find a willing, true love marriage, right? Yue Niang's lips moved, but she didn't say anything. Do those men really need true love? They are simply hiding behind the heir of the Duke's household, using him as a shield to indulge their greed and desires. Otherwise, why would they go to brothels to chase true love? You keep talking about justice, but when did you ever think about those women? Do you know how many of those soldiers were promoted because of their wives' family connections? When they were stationed at the borders, their wives managed the household and took care of the family. When they were still insignificant, their wives were there by their side. But now, with life going well, they want to divorce their wives. Is that fair to those women? This disaster was caused without reason. Yue Niang wanted to argue with me, but she couldn't say a word. Since Yue Niang has admitted to sowing discord and shaking the morale of the army, she was immediately taken into custody and placed in the prison. As for those soldiers who clamored for true love, their mansions, shops, and land were all transferred to their wives' names. Let them go pursue love. Those who refuse will be dealt with according to military law. A family is the foundation of a country. If a family is unstable, how can the country be stable? Zhou Yi listened intently to my words. I turned to look at Zhou Yi, the imperial crown prince who used to only know how to eat chicken legs with greasy lips. He had gradually begun to exhibit the demeanor of a ruler. His speech and actions silently conveyed to everyone, this was the bearing that the master of the Eastern Palace should have. When the emperor heard of my remarks, he summoned me to the palace to his study for a private talk. Now, everyone is talking about the achievements of the Tao family. A Jiao, are you trying to take credit with me? The emperor sat by the fire writing, his voice sounding light. After I bowed and stood obediently, I picked up an orange from the nearby table, peeled it, and offered it to him. Your Majesty, try this. Is this orange sweet? The emperor took it, took a bite, and nodded.
Sweet.
This orange, like everything, has its own sweetness. But even if they are sweet and delicious, everyone understands one truth: they cannot live without the peel. The peel nourishes them and helps them grow. If the peel breaks, they will shrivel up quickly. The ministers are like the orange slices, and Your Majesty is the peel. The ministers depend on Your Majesty to survive. Even if someone praises the sweetness, it cannot change the fact that they will always be just orange slices. The emperor took another bite of the orange and laughed. I am the peel? Not good-looking and not useful.
Who says that?
The peel can be used in medicine to expel dampness and nourish the stomach. It can be made into tea to quench thirst and replenish energy. Unlike the orange slices, which are just eaten for a taste, I teased. The emperor smiled more brightly. Today I finally see what your tongue is like. No wonder you managed to silence the one who encouraged the soldiers to divorce their wives. The emperor paused before continuing. I was just joking with you, don't take it to heart. The Tao family has been loyal for generations, and your father is my cousin. I understand. I called you today for two things. Yesterday, after you had Yue Niang thrown into prison, today the Marquis of Gubei came to me, tearfully begging for her release. He said his only beloved son, Qin Huaiyuan, had become a shell of himself, neither eating nor drinking after Yue Niang was imprisoned. He had to put aside his pride and beg me for help. The Marquis of Gubei has served the country loyally all his life, and this is the first time he has asked me for something. I couldn't refuse him. The emperor looked at me with a pained expression. As your uncle, I naturally feel for you. I wish I could have that vile woman executed for you.
But
I knelt on the ground. Your Majesty need not worry. A Jiao understands. If we hurt the Marquis of Gubei's feelings, it could affect the morale of the army. Please rest assured, I am not wronged. As expected, my guess was correct. Rather than the Marquis of Gubei being unable to do anything about Qin Huaiyuan, I would rather believe that Yue Niang had become too important to the Marquis. There must be some related interests for him to lower his pride and beg the emperor to protect Yue Niang. The emperor nodded in satisfaction. There's another matter. I want to consult you about it. Ir is my eldest son. When the late emperor was alive, he favored him the most and made him crown prince. On his deathbed, he repeatedly reminded me to find the best consort for Ir. Now, in the entire capital, the only one who is worthy of him is you. Today, your uncle speaks honestly with you. On a public level, with the Tao family's stronghold, even when Ir becomes emperor, the borders will not be in danger, and the important ministers won't dare to go against him. On a personal level, I know my son, and he has you in his heart. You don't know this, but because you once said that the crown prince is too spoiled, he went to Yuhang to meditate for 3 years, forcing himself to correct his bad habits. I didn't like those habits either, but the Empress Dowager dotes on him. That day, to ask Lufeng Pavilion to host a banquet for you, he knelt for a full hour, breaking the precedent. When he came back to the capital and found out about the broken engagement, he hurried back overnight, sending the imperial astrologer to draw a plum blossom on jade for you, afraid that you would be looked down upon. Today, your uncle says all this, hoping you'll consider it carefully. If you don't want to, that's fine. As I exited the study, snow had begun to fall. I declined the umbrella from Mei and slowly walked to the palace gate. Though the snowflakes were light, they added a bit of chill as they accumulated on me. Miss, your eyelashes are so beautiful, so long, they even catch the snowflakes. I truly envy you. Mei, perhaps sensing I was preoccupied, tried to lighten the mood. Suddenly, I remembered that day when Zhou Yi had come through the snow. His lashes were also dusted with sparkling snow, and his attendants were busy serving him as he responded to the Empress, yet his eyes were always on me. I knew Zhou Yi's feelings. After returning to the capital, He had remained calm and composed in every situation. The only time he had lost control of his emotions was the day he took Yue Niang and Qin Huaiyuan to the magistrate's office. Normally, without solid evidence, it would be improper, even for the crown prince, to take people from the marquis's household. Everyone thought it was because Yue Niang had been disrespectful to the crown prince. But only I knew that when he heard Yue Niang call me a broken shoe, the veins on his clenched fist bulged, and he was furious. At that moment, I understood that he treated me differently. Ah, Jiao, the snow is so heavy. Why don't you use an umbrella? Zhou Yi stood by the carriage with an umbrella, holding a hand warmer, and asked. I remembered what the emperor had said. That day, to request Lufeng Pavilion, he knelt in the snow for an hour. A warm feeling spread through my heart, from a corner I had never noticed before. I want to know, how cold was it when you knelt in the snow for Lufeng Pavilion? I smiled at him. Zhou Yi's ears turned slightly red. After handing me the hand warmer, he lowered his voice. I don't mind the cold, but I don't want you to feel even a little bit of it. Then, he hurriedly looked up toward the palace gate. Since Father Emperor saw you today, you must know about the Marquis of Gubei's plea. I feel helpless that I couldn't avenge you. I shook my head. It's never just one side of the story. This matter was not entirely her fault. If Qin Huaiyuan truly had feelings for me and cared for the bigger picture, he wouldn't have been swayed by her. Both of them were equally to blame. My resentment toward them ended the moment they left the Tao family residence. This life is short, and I don't want to waste my time and feelings on people who aren't worth it. Besides, now I suspect that the Yue Niang in front of me is a fake. After the thought crossed my mind yesterday, I seriously started looking into what Yue Niang had been doing over the past 6 months. I found that her preferences had completely changed. She used to love embroidery. No one in the capital could match her skills, and my mother had even ordered an embroidery frame specifically for her. She loved playing the zither. The banana willow zither in her room was one I had asked the Empress Dowager to acquire. It was the only one in the world. But now, the embroidery frame and the banana leaf zither were both covered in dust. Since her fall into the water, she hadn't touched them. After the fall, she could still recite poems and match couplets, but there wasn't a single volume of poems written in her room. Yue Niang is from the south, where she rarely eats spicy food, but since her fall, she has been unable to do without spice in every meal. All of these signs, along with her strange remarks, made me more and more certain she was a fake. This morning, I had already sent someone out to search for the real Yue Niang's whereabouts. Zhou Yi helped me onto the carriage. When he heard this, his movement stiffened, but then he said, You should return to the residence first. I'll go ask the tutor. The tutor knows everything and can surely help. When I returned home, as soon as I entered the courtyard, Zhao Mama, followed by a group of little maids, came in. Miss, drink this hot ginger soup and soak your feet in rose essence water. You caught a chill today, so take care. The handkerchief has also been heated up. Bring it over. After I was settled warmly on the bed, covered with blankets and holding a hand stove, Zhao Mama finally sent everyone away, leaving only Kei Mei. Miss, do you know why the Marquis of Gubei is pleading for Yue Niang? Zhao Mama asked as she tucked in the blankets. It seems the Marquis household has agreed to this marriage. I shook my head, surprised that everyone else knew the news before I did. After you went to the palace, I saw that the weather looked like it would snow. I thought of sewing you a new stove cover, but there was no suitable fabric in the storeroom, so I went to the silk shop on North Street. There, I found that all the shops in that area are now under the Marquis of Gubei's name. I carefully inquired and learned that Yue Niang had made some kind of wager agreement with these shops. If she could earn enough money in half a month, the shops would be sold to the Marquis household at a low price. If she failed, she would owe 100 taels of silver for each shop. The shopkeepers, being old foxes, thought the business wouldn't be completed, so they all signed the agreement. She set up all sorts of promotional events, strange and unheard of, which attracted everyone to go. In just 10 days, the task was completed. Now, All the shops on North Street are under the Marquis household, and the Marquis spent almost no money. This makes sense. As I suspected, the Marquis of Guobei's protection of Yue Niang wasn't entirely for Qin Huaiyuan. After Zhao Mama finished speaking, she tried to comfort me. Miss, it's a blessing to be free from such a calculating family. I smiled and nodded. Yes, it is indeed a blessing. It's better than marrying into the family, only for the husband to be seduced and the in-laws to be divided, Zhao Mama added. After talking a little longer, she added as she prepared to leave. By the way, miss, after you went to the palace, you may not know, but although Yue Niang was released from prison, the crown prince said that although her death penalty could be pardoned, her crimes of disturbing the army's morale and spreading rumors could not be forgiven. She was handed over to the maids around him for further punishment. Everyone thought that Yue Niang was only punished with 20 lashes, receiving some minor injuries. In truth, the lashes were coated with medicine, and by the time the last few were delivered, her skin had been torn. After that, the medicine had fully penetrated into her flesh. On rainy days, Yue Niang would be so sore that she couldn't get out of bed, and her whole body would itch, with no cure. Only when the weather turned warm would it get better. Zhao Mama used to serve the empress in the palace. After I returned to the capital, the empress sent her to the duke's residence to take care of me. Any news from the palace would be passed on to Zhao Mama by her old friends. If it weren't for Zhao Mama, I wouldn't have known how Zhou Yi had punished Yue Niang. Seeing me in a daze, Zhao Mama continued. The crown prince is doing this for your sake, miss, so please don't think too much about it. Besides, he will be the future emperor, the ruler of the country. If he were too kind-hearted, it would be hard for him to establish authority. So, it's only natural that he would have such a side. I smiled, feeling amused. Zhao Mama, I was just thinking. He truly does care for me. He can't bear to see me suffer, which is why he punished Yue Niang this way. But then, unsure of my attitude toward Yue Niang, he didn't tell me. I grew up in the duke's residence. I'm not someone to be weak-hearted. The methods used in the military to deal with spies are far harsher than this. I've seen it before, so you don't need to worry about frightening me. Besides, I truly admire Zhou Yi now. He is calm and decisive. You're right, he is the future emperor. If he doesn't have a tough side, it would be hard for him to stand firm. When Zhao Mama heard me say this, she felt relieved. The next day, before it was light, Kei Mei woke me up. Miss, someone is asking to see you. It's Yue Niang's younger sister. I immediately woke up and quickly got out of bed, heading toward the main hall. But Kei Mei stopped me, urging me to wash my face and change clothes first before letting me go. When I arrived at the main hall, I saw a girl who looked about 12 or 13, sitting on a chair with a bundle in her arms, looking around warily. She was wearing a peach-colored, gold-embroidered jacket, but the cuffs had come undone. Her hair was held up with a single silver pin, and her attire was even more modest than the second-tier maid serving her tea. When she saw me, her wary expression softened. She stood up, bowed, and said in a gentle voice, Sui greets sister A. Jiao. Yue Niang's father was a distant relative of my mother's family, so, according to tradition, she should have called me sister. Yue Niang's father had put a lot of thought into naming her Yue, Sui, names that alluded to the moon and the goddess Chang'e. Unfortunately, the thoughtfulness ended there. What brings you here? I asked directly. Although I had never met Yue Niang's family, I had no good feelings toward them. Yue Niang had lived in the duke's residence for 10 years, and her family had never sent even a letter to ask how she was doing. Sui knelt down with a thud. I came to find my cousin, to ask her to give me a way out. I'm willing to stay in the residence and serve as a maid. I just hope you will take me in. I'm not asking for charity. I bring a letter from my older sister. Sui opened her bundle, revealing several letters, a jade necklace, and a hairpin. I opened one of the yellowed letters. It was written shortly after Yue Niang arrived at the duke's residence, saying that she was doing well and telling her father not to worry. The second letter was written when Yue Niang was 10 years old. In 2 months, she would turn 10. Father said that when I turned 10, We'll go to Guangqing Terrace to watch the moon. Do you still remember, father? I'm looking forward to going with you. I hope to return soon. The third letter was written when she was 15. Father, I am 15 today. The Duke and Madam are very kind to me, and a Jiao even got me a rare banana leaf zither to celebrate. I really like it. How are you? The last letter was written half a year ago. Father, this is the last letter I'll write to you. I have no other requests. Just please take this jade hairpin and place it at my mother's grave, so I can stay with her. I heard that my second sister is pregnant. This necklace is for her child. The hairpin was given to me by my concubine mother when I came to the capital, and now I'm returning it to my sister. Don't reply. My hands trembled uncontrollably as I held the letter. All these years, they had long since forgotten about Yue Niang. They never once replied. How had she spent those nights? Waiting for a letter. Your second sister's birth mother, is she Lu? I asked. Sui nodded. I touched the necklace, feeling deeply sorrowful. My foolish Yue Niang, for every bit of kindness others showed her, she would remember it forever. This Aunt Lu, who had secretly taken care of Yue Niang during the 2 years after her birth mother's passing, she would always keep her in her heart. And there is this, though I couldn't find the key. Sui took out a small box. Kei Mei went to find a locksmith. After opening the box, it contained a booklet, which started from the time Yue Niang came to the Duke's residence and continued until half a year ago. It turns out that after that illness, Yue Niang often had headaches. When the pain occurred, she could hear another person's voice. At first, she thought it was a hallucination, so she would sit there, quietly listening. But later, she realized that the person actually resided inside her body. Over the years, whenever Yue Niang had a headache, that person would appear, saying things to provoke her, trying to kill Yue Niang's soul so that they could take over her body. But Yue Niang was well taken care of, and that person never found an opportunity. Yue Niang struggled for a long time, and her health deteriorated. The time she could control her consciousness became shorter and shorter. In the end, she chose to jump into the lake and destroy her body in order to protect me. I knew she craved power and status. If she became me, she would surely try to climb the ranks. She had once said that the simplest way for a woman to capture a man was with her body. I knew she would compete for the heir with Ajiao and might even do other harmful things to her. But Ajiao would tolerate her, thinking it was me. I couldn't let her harm Ajiao, but I was powerless. I didn't know how to tell Ajiao about it. Everyone would think I was crazy. I thought about jumping into the lake. Since I couldn't swim well, if I jumped into a lake full of floating plants, even if I wanted to save myself, it would be difficult. As long as I died, Li Xian would die too. I would never give her a chance to harm Ajiao. After reading all this, I was left speechless for a long time. All these years, Yue Niang had suffered so much, but I knew nothing about it, leaving her to bear it all alone, walking into a dead end. No wonder she, who never liked boat rides, insisted on going to the lake that day. I looked at the last page of the notebook. Father, I have never blamed you all these years. I am willing to die. I only ask that after my death, you don't cause trouble at the Duke's residence or make things difficult for Ajiao. Just treat it as fulfilling the bond between us in this lifetime. My Yue Niang, even after death, worried that she might trouble me and had prepared everything in advance. But Yue Niang, did you ever think that Ajiao wouldn't be afraid of trouble, wouldn't fear being harmed? The only thing she fears is living the rest of her days without you. I sat in the main hall for a long time until my mother rushed over after hearing the news, gently hugging me. That's when I broke down in tears. Mother, I don't believe it. I don't believe Yue Niang is dead. How could another person live inside someone's body? Mother, tell me, this is Yue Niang playing a trick on me. She's fooling me. Did she really fall in love with Qin Huaiyuan? I can let go. I don't want Qin Huaiyuan. If she wants to marry into the Marquis house, then let her. I won't compete with her. I just want her to stay alive. But this handwriting is so familiar to me. I tried to deceive myself, but the more I cried, the harder it became. I don't know how long I cried, but suddenly, I remembered what Joey said. The Grand Tutor knows everything. I'll go find him. He must know what happened. May, prepare the carriage. Let's go to the Grand Tutor's house. I lifted my leg to go out, but my mother stopped me. The Grand Tutor sees no one except His Majesty and the Crown Prince. Even your father can only speak with him through a screen. He won't see you. But no one could stop me now. I urgently needed to know what happened to Yue Niang. Just as I was about to kneel and beg the Grand Tutor to see me, the steward opened the door and came out to greet me. Miss Tao, the Grand Tutor is waiting for you inside. I followed the steward into the study. Zhou Yi was already waiting for me. His lips were tinged with stubble, which indicated he had stayed at the Grand Tutor's house last night.
Jiao.
He looked at me gently, his eyes bloodshot. After staring for a long time, he reached out to touch my hairpin. Jiao, I have something to tell you. His voice was soft and gentle, but I felt even more uneasy. When something bad happened when I was young, my mother would always speak to me like that. Jiao, grandfather can no longer hold you. He must stay at the border he guarded all his life. Jiao, Shao Qi is already 18 years old. He's an old hound now, but he was happy to be with you at the end. Jiao, we're going back to the capital. The poplar trees you planted will protect the soldiers at the border. I struggled to suppress my emotions, but my voice still trembled. What happened? Zhou Yi lowered his head and said nothing. After a long while, he spoke. Jiao, you must know that your Yue Niang, the one who grew up with you, never betrayed you. She never thought of harming you. Finally, he tightly grasped my hand and slowly said, Jiao, Yue Niang is dead. I came to the Grand Tutor's house specifically to ask about this, but when I heard it from Zhou Yi's lips, my heart stopped for a moment. I couldn't hear anything. All I could hear was Yue Niang's voice. Good you, Tao Jiao. You're being unreasonable. You owe me a pair of jade earrings. Jiao, the peach blossoms in the south of the city have bloomed. Let's go watch them. Jiao, the Duke taught me a new move. I'll beat you in chess today. Jiao.
Jiao.
Yue Niang's voice grew farther and farther away. My vision gradually darkened until I could see nothing. I reached out, trying to grab hold of Yue Niang's voice, but I missed. The sound around me grew louder. Someone seemed to be urgently calling me. Jiao, don't scare me, Jiao, what's wrong with you? Please respond to me, Jiao. It was Zhou Yi's voice. I heard Zhou Yi crying, calling out urgently and cautiously. I wanted to tell Zhou Yi that I couldn't see, that I couldn't hear Yue Niang's voice anymore. But my heart felt empty, as if the bottomless wind was blowing through it, chilling me to the core. My head was spinning, getting worse and worse, to the point that I felt like throwing up. Finally, after vomiting, I passed out. When I woke up, I was in the Grand Tutor's manor. Zhou Yi was sitting by my bedside, staring at me. His eyes were even redder than before. Jiao, I'm sorry, it's all my fault. Zhou Yi's eyes were filled with joy, relief, and guilt. He sat on the floor, leaning on the bed, staring into my eyes. Jiao, drink some water first. The Grand Tutor will be here soon. He knew I was eager to know the truth, and used that as a condition to coax me into eating. I had a few spoonfuls of porridge and drank a cup of water before the Grand Tutor arrived. The Grand Tutor was a senior minister. Both the current emperor and Zhou Yi were his students. I had thought he must be at least in his 60s, but to my surprise, he only seemed a few years older than Zhou Yi, holding a folding fan and looking like a refined young man. Seeing my dazed expression, the Grand Tutor sighed. Young lady, you are the only person in DeLiang, besides His Majesty and the Crown Prince, to have seen my true face. The Crown Prince was so worried about you that he couldn't sleep all night. Fine, I'll break my rule and see you this time. According to the Taifu, he was born in a time 1,000 years after this one. Due to a distortion in the time-space continuum, he fell into a system and entered the body of Qing Feng, who had just won the imperial examination but tragically fell off a cliff. From then on, he lived under the name Qing Feng in the Great Liang Dynasty. The Taifu knows the entire historical process, and he can solve every disaster that befalls the Great Liang. So, When Emperor Taizong ascended to the throne, he became the Taifu and started teaching the current emperor. However, perhaps due to the time travel, every 10 years for others equals only 1 year for him. Thus, while 2 emperors have changed, his appearance has only aged a few years. To keep this secret, he refuses to see anyone except the emperor and the crown prince. After the crown prince shared the girl's words with the Taifu, the old man knew immediately that she and he came from the same time. It must have been that incident in the water. I came today hoping the Taifu would tell me that everything Yue Niang left behind was false. But standing before the young Taifu, I began to realize that perhaps there really is another timeline. She has been inside Yue Niang's body for 10 years. I try to recount this calmly. Mei presented the items that Su Yi had brought to the Taifu. After examining them, the Taifu sighed deeply. Really a foolish girl sigh. According to her time's trajectory, she was supposed to take over Yue Niang's body when Yue Niang was 6 years old, but since Yue Niang was saved, she came too late, and in the end, she couldn't surpass the original owner of this body. However, after Yue Niang fell seriously ill and endured 10 years of torment, her physical and mental strength couldn't compare to the other. The Taifu's words were a declaration to me. Yue Niang is truly gone. My Yue Niang was killed by that woman Li Xianxian. This winter, the snow seems heavier than usual. Snowflakes fall layer by layer, as though trying to conceal something. I lock myself in Yue Niang's room, refusing to see anyone. I bend over and rest on the embroidery frame, closing my eyes, remembering the scenes where Yue Niang embroidered while I wrote, under the warm spring sun. I didn't feel this sad when Qin Huaiyuan came to break off the engagement. I didn't feel this sad when I thought she had betrayed me. But now I know clearly that she is no longer here. It's as if my heart is being slowly cut by a blunt knife, and the pain is suffocating me. I would rather she had truly taken Qin Huaiyuan for me. I would rather she had changed. As long as she was alive, that would be enough. When Yue Niang entered the Duke's mansion, I had just returned from the frontier. It was she who accompanied me in adapting to life in the capital. Yue Niang was the closest sister to me. She was half my life. But now she is gone. Every day, I cry until I am exhausted and sleep. In my dreams, Yue Niang always comes to find me. She holds my hand and we catch butterflies together in the garden. Jiao, I must go to the frontier one day, to see where you were born. I want to ride horses like you. You'll teach me archery, and I want to learn how to slide down the sand. When I wake, I want to take her with me, but I can't find her anywhere. Yue Niang is truly gone. From now on, will we only meet in dreams? Days pass in a haze, and one day, Mei is outside crying, knocking on the door. Miss, if you don't open the door, Mei will crash her head against the wall. Her voice just faded when Zhao Momo's scolding voice came from outside. You care about the young lady, but don't speak recklessly. Miss, the Marquis Mansion is sending a betrothal gift to that Yue Niang, or rather, Li Xianxian. I opened the door, and the sunlight stung my eyes, making them hurt. Go bring Sui here. Mei wiped her tears in joy and left, while Zhao Momo, her face full of concern, supported me. Miss, do you remember how Yue Niang cried when you had a quarrel with your mother and wouldn't eat? Now you're neglecting your own health. You've lost so much weight. Your wrists are so thin they could break with a single touch. Yue Niang, if she were here, would be crying. She thought so hard about you, Mississippi. You should take better care of yourself. Moreover, miss, are you really going to let that shameless woman continue to torment Yue Niang's body? Zhao Momo's words woke me up. These days, every time I think of Yue Niang, my heart aches so badly I can hardly breathe. I couldn't care about anything else. Now that I've calmed down a bit, my hatred for Li Xianxian rises. Marrying into the Marquis Mansion? Climbing to the top? Ha, dream on. I will trample her underfoot. Cosette, are you alright? Su Yi had changed into new clothes, her face looking a little rosier than when she first came to the Tao family mansion. She wore a small white flower in her hair. I haven't been able to take care of you these days. How have you been in the mansion? I forced out a smile and asked. Sui nodded, her face filled with gratitude. I'm doing fine. Honestly, I don't need these silks and satin or the delicacies. As long as I can stay alive, that's all I need. I just want to live for myself. I remember Yue Niang once told me about how her stepmother treated the children born from her father's other wives. Yue Niang often sighed. If it weren't for the good fortune of entering the Duke's mansion, I probably wouldn't have lived much longer under her hands. From what Sui was wearing, I could tell her life at home hadn't been easy. Her stepmother gave everything good to her own children. My mother, Yue Niang, had only 2 daughters, so she wasn't favored. At home, we could barely eat a hot meal, and warmth was a luxury. After my mother fell ill, they didn't even call a doctor, and she was painfully taken from us. After my mother died, they married my second sister to a county official's son as his concubine. To survive, I had to please my stepmother, massaging her shoulders and legs every day, living worse than her servants. Yet even then, she still wanted to sell me. My father agreed, and they planned to marry me to a county merchant who was over 60. He could have been my grandfather. I didn't want to live the same life as my mother and sister. I wanted to live for myself. Even if I had to do hard labor or remain single, I refused to endure that humiliation. One day, I overheard my parents talking. They said my older sister had died. My mother urged my father to go to the Duke's mansion to beg for a daughter, thinking they might get some silver out of it. My father went to the capital, but came back a few days later, saying my sister was still alive. After scolding my sister, they locked away the letters and the box. Until half a month ago, someone from the Marquis's residence came and said they were going to propose. My mother was overjoyed, while my father hesitated. He said if what my elder sister said was true, then the current Luo Yunyang was not their daughter. But then he too became happy, because regardless of whether it was true or not, the Marquis's family was offering a large bride price, and they would be able to use this to gain favor and rise in the ranks. Listening to Sui's account, I was so angry that I wished I could tie up these greedy and self-serving parents and beat them right now. They didn't care whether Yunyang was alive or dead. They only cared about how much money and status she could bring them. It was also on that day that the second sister's in-laws came with news that she had lost her child and died from excessive blood loss. Father muttered something about bad luck and immediately sent the messenger away. I understood even more now. The Luo family's illegitimate daughters had no way out. No matter where they went, it would always be a hellish path. So, while they were entertaining the Marquis's housekeeper, I stole these items and fled in the dead of night. I knew that only you, cousin, could help me now. I asked for nothing else but the chance to eat, have a roof over my head, and live like a human being. I looked at her face, which resembled Yunyang's, and my heart was filled with mixed emotions. It turned out that she was Yue Niang's youngest daughter. No wonder the plain silver hairpin in her hair looked so familiar. I realized it was the one Yue Niang had worn for some years, then had sent back. "Stay with me," I said. "I don't need you to serve me. From now on, I will arrange for you to learn embroidery, house management, and calligraphy. You just need to take care of yourself. You brought Yue Niang's things to me, so you are my benefactor. I will help you wherever I can. You learn your skills first. If you want to marry into a good family later, I'll adopt you as my sworn sister and arrange a marriage for you with someone from the Marquis's residence. If you don't want to marry once you've learned your skills, you can manage the estate and shop for me, save some money and buy a house or open a shop. You will be free to do whatever you like." Sui burst into tears, crying for a long time, then knelt before me, bowing deeply. "Cousin, I will always remember your life-saving grace." "Yue Niang, I am sorry I learned the truth too late. I couldn't save the second sister and Yue Niang, whom you cared for so much. But Sui, I will teach her with all my effort." Since news of the Marquis's proposal to the Luo family spread, everyone in the capital has been gossiping. After Zhao Momo heard the rumors, she came back to tell me. The Marquis of Guobei made money, but lost all his face. Now, everyone is mocking their family for giving up the marriage with the Duke's residence, just for a 6th-rank official's daughter. Zhao Momo hadn't spoken for long when Zhou Yi arrived. "Ah Jiao, With the year-end approaching and no business at court, Father has granted me a leave from attending, so let's go to the snow garden and watch a play. I knew he wanted to take me out to relax. All right, I replied, but it will be a bit dull, with just us. You've been back in the capital for 2 months, and you should meet up with some of the noble young men you know. How about we invite them to come along? Zhou Yi looked overjoyed. Sure, as long as you're willing, anything's fine. I knew that Li Qianqian was restless. This time, she invited all the noble young men under the guise of the crown prince, and even if Qin Huaiyuan didn't want to go, he would have to. If he went, Li Qianqian would certainly follow. Sure enough, Li Qianqian arrived in a pale pink jacket. Yue Niang's natural beauty was enhanced by the outfit. I looked at her, and my heart ached. Clearly, Yue Niang was right in front of me, but she wasn't my Yue Niang. I kept pinching my palm to force myself to stay calm, but the pain in my palm was nothing compared to the pain in my heart. Suddenly, someone pried my fingers apart, and a warm, strong hand enveloped mine. I turned to look. It was Zhou Yi. Jiao, if you really can't stand it, pinch me instead. Don't hurt yourself, he said softly. I didn't reply, letting my fingertips relax without pulling my hand away. After the play ended, the audience cheered. Thanks to His Highness the Crown Prince, we are here in the Royal Theatre to listen to such a wonderful performance. It was truly beautiful. Zhou Yi smiled. I've heard that many of you are fond of the opera. If anyone can sing the part we just heard, this fan will belong to them. The fan was painted and inscribed by Mo Zhenming himself. As Zhou Yi finished speaking, everyone eagerly tried to mimic the performance, but no one could capture the charm of it. By the way, wasn't Yue Niang the best at singing? I'm sure she can perform it, someone remarked. Yes, Yue Niang is a talented woman, so she must be able to sing it. If she doesn't like this fan, she can sing for us. I will give her any treasure from my estate if she performs it. Everyone started teasing, and Li Qianqian stood up shyly. I can't sing. Zhou Yi was very understanding. Since everyone says Yue Niang is so talented, not knowing how to sing doesn't matter. How about Yue Niang gives us a critique of the play instead? If her critique is good, this fan will belong to her. Does anyone disagree? There was no objection. Yue Niang is so talented. If we can't hear a wonderful critique, we're happy even if the fan doesn't go to me. As the voices of agreement grew louder, Li Qianqian's face slowly changed. She couldn't critique the play. Or rather, she didn't understand it at all. This is what the Tai Fu had told me. People from their time had no knowledge of our interests. Those few who could understand them were revered as masters. The Tai Fu was one of them, but Li Qianqian was clearly not. True masters know how to hide their sharp edges and adapt to the times. Watching the usually eloquent Yue Niang unable to speak a word, Qin Huaiyuan stood up to help her. Yue Niang was distracted during the performance and didn't listen attentively. After the next performance, we'll ask her to give a critique. As the next play began, Qin Huaiyuan whispered to Li Qianqian. By the end of the play, Li Qianqian looked slightly more confident. But Zhou Yi changed tactics. This is already the second chance given to Yue Niang. To avoid any bias, let's have her write down her critique. We can all appreciate the writing of a talented woman. Li Qianqian's face turned red again, and she looked helplessly at Qin Huaiyuan. He, too, looked at her with eager anticipation. So, Li Qianqian had no choice but to pick up the brush and write. As she wrote, the previously lively crowd gradually quieted down. Keimei glanced at the scene and mercilessly mocked. What talent! Her handwriting looks like worms crawling across the page. It's worse than mine. Her words made everyone burst out laughing. Li Qianqian blushed with embarrassment and was about to leave when Zhou Yi smiled and stopped her. Everyone don't laugh. Muniang is giving you a chance, so hurry up and thank her. Li Qianqian cast a grateful glance at Zhou Yi, but in that glance, she couldn't help but show a hint of flirtation. Keimei, who noticed it, rolled her eyes. What a shameless woman, always trying to seduce men. Why wasn't she born in a brothel? She would have plenty of room to play there. I bet within a month, she'd be the top courtesan. That day, when the play ended, Qin Huaiyuan's expression darkened noticeably. He wasn't stupid. He could tell that Yue Niang had feelings for Zhou Yi, and Zhou Yi stoked the flames by giving her a ring as they were about to part. Kei Mei, sitting in the carriage, felt sorry for the ring. Such a good thing. Giving it to that woman is really a waste. Zhou Yi gently massaged my hand and smiled. Don't feel sorry. It's not worth much. If it helps create a rift between them, then it was worth it. On the eve of the new year, I was napping on the Rohan bed by the window, listening to Zhao Mama teach Sui to read the ledger. Kei Mei ran in from outside, holding a small basket of oranges. Miss, Madam asked me to bring you the sweetest ones. Oh, and His Royal Highness also sent something. What Zhou Yi sent was a key with a letter attached. Meet me at Jiayu Tower. I was too tired to go, but as soon as Zhao Mama heard about it, she got up, dragged me off the bed, and started painting my eyebrows, putting on lipstick, and changing my clothes. Miss, are you really not moved by His Royal Highness? Who says I'm not moved? There's a little bit of feeling, yes. When he punished Li Qianqian to stand up for me. When he held me and cried. When I saw his eyes, so red they made my heart ache. When we made Li Qianqian look foolish together. And that day on the way home when he kept gently stroking my hand, leaving marks from his nails. There was a little bit of heartache. But I also dared not allow myself to fall for him. He is the crown prince, the future emperor, and he is destined to have 3 palaces and 6 courtyards. He will have to face countless women, and he can't promise that he won't fall for someone else, won't change his heart. Once, I trusted Qin Huaiyuan too, but didn't he fall for Li Qianqian? I'm afraid that by then, I won't be able to be the virtuous wife I want to be. I'll be jealous. I'll lose my mind. So, I'd rather abandon this feeling. It's better to go today and make things clear to Zhou Yi. I won't hold him back any longer. When I arrived at the top of Jiayu Tower, the door was locked. It turned out the key was for this door. When I opened it and stepped onto the outdoor platform, I saw a sky full of fireworks. How beautiful! So beautiful it took my breath away. I didn't notice when Zhou Yi had arrived behind me, but he wrapped a thick sable cloak around my shoulders and asked, "Do you like it?" I nodded. "I love it." "I love it too," he said, looking at me. "Ajiao, I like you. Like the fireworks in the sky. I want to tell everyone that I like Tao Ajiao. From the first time you entered the palace, I liked you. How could a little girl be so beautiful, like a porcelain doll carved with care? I thought you didn't like me because I was fat, so I went to Yue Niang. The grand tutor was strict, and every time I couldn't persevere, I thought of you. I thought that if I became a little better, the chance that you would like me would increase. I want to give you everything good in the world. I don't want to see you shed a single tear. You don't know, when you cry, it feels like thousands of knives are stabbing my heart. The day you fainted from crying, I wanted to tear Li Qianqian into 1,000 pieces. I've never seen anyone like me, someone who would cry over someone else." Zhou Yi's voice began to tremble as he choked out his feelings for me. "But I have to be Tao Ajiao first, before I can be anyone's wife," I said softly, unsure of how to reject him. Zhou Yi didn't respond but handed me a memorial. Father Emperor approved my petition. I opened the memorial and was shocked, not knowing what to say. Zhou Yi, as the crown prince of the East Palace, had petitioned the emperor, requesting that no secondary consort position be established for him. He also asked for the emperor's decree. Zhou Yi will never take a concubine. Zhou Yi gently took my hand. "Ajiao, no other woman has ever entered my eyes. Since I met you, you are the only one in my eyes and heart. Today, in front of heaven and earth, I vow that if I ever betray Tao Ajiao, let me die without a burial place and never be reborn." I couldn't express my feelings at that moment. He was the future emperor, yet he was making such a vow for me. My rationality was slowly fading, and I couldn't convince myself to reject him anymore. On the eve of the New Year's feast, the emperor sent 2 extra dishes to the Guogong mansion. These 2 dishes are for the future crown princess. After hearing about Zhou Yi's promise to me, My mother happily drank 2 more cups of wine. My father also praised him repeatedly. Zhou, this child, Zhou, I knew I didn't misjudge him. But for now, no one else knew. Because this drama had not yet ended. In the spring, when the flowers bloomed, the Empress hosted a flower viewing banquet and sent invitations to the whole family, inviting Yue Niang as well. I hadn't seen Li Qianqian for a long time, and she had lost a bit of weight. Whoever has the best flowers today, this hairpin will be given to them, the Empress said, taking a tassel gold hairpin from her hair. Li Qianqian looked at the gold hairpin with undisguised desire in her eyes. But unfortunately, her skills were lacking, and the flowers she arranged were far from beautiful. The Empress shook her head. This child, when she was raised in the Guogong mansion, I saw her twice. She was so steady, but now she's become so restless. Sigh. Before Li Qianqian even left the palace, the streets were already full of jokes about her. She can't even arrange flowers, and yet she's trying to show off in front of the Empress. Afterwards, under my arrangement, Li Qianqian attended several unavoidable gatherings, gradually exposing more of her flaws. After all, she was a daughter from a lesser family. Even though she had been raised in the Guogong mansion for a few years, she hadn't learned anything. She couldn't arrange flowers, she didn't know how to burn incense, she couldn't play chess, she couldn't write, and she didn't understand opera. No one knew why the Ho family married her. She knew how to make money. Well, it seems this Ho family isn't all that great either. These rumors, Xiao Mei reported to me every day with great enthusiasm. I reminded her to be mindful of Sui in the room, as I didn't want to hurt her pride. But Sui smiled and said, listening to Xiao Mei elder sister talk, I feel even luckier, being saved and guided by cousin to learn these things, so that I won't make a fool of myself in the future. Her humble attitude always made me think of Yue Niang. It was time to send Li Qianqian out of the Marquis's house. Recently, Mrs. Qin took Li Qianqian everywhere, embarrassing herself, and it made her so angry that she smashed many things when she returned home. Li Qianqian was no pushover either. When Mrs. Qin scolded her, she fought back, yelling, all the money in the Qin family comes from me. How can it hurt you to be mocked by others? I don't see you losing any weight over it. Mrs. Qin became seriously ill from the anger. Qin Huaiyuan, caught in the middle, was in a difficult position. He had thought he liked a talented, unique woman, but later realized that apart from singing and writing poetry, Li Qianqian could do nothing. Even his colleagues' concubines were more capable than her, so his affection for her gradually faded. Until one day, when Zhou went to the Marquis's residence to discuss the military training in the western suburbs, Qin Huaiyuan went to fetch a map, and Li Qianqian, holding a fruit plate, pretended not to know Zhou was in the study and barged in. Zhou complimented her on being gentle and virtuous, and then pretended to have shoulder pain, prompting her to massage his shoulders. Just then, Qin Huaiyuan returned and saw Li Qianqian practically pressed against Zhou. His dissatisfaction with her grew stronger. That evening, after Zhou left, Qin Huaiyuan argued with Li Qianqian for most of the night. The oil was already spread, and now it only needed a spark. I personally lit this fire. The imperial decree procession that came out of the palace was long enough to stretch halfway down the street. Everyone knew by now that the legitimate daughter of the duke's household, Tao Ajiao, was betrothed to the current crown prince, Zhou. In keeping with the tradition that a joyous occasion should not be turned back, the procession circled the duke's residence before passing in front of the Gubei Marquis's house and returning to the palace. On the same day, many people came to the capital's yamen to accuse the Gubei Marquis's house of deceiving them out of their shops, causing them to lose all their money. Because there were so many people, the yamen had no choice but to take it seriously. After an investigation, Yue Niang's gambling actions were declared invalid because gambling was illegal in Daliang. In the past, they hadn't dared to complain because they were complicit in the gambling and didn't have the moral high ground. But now, with my backing, their courage grew, and since I would pay the fine, they felt emboldened. So, after hearing the rumors that the Qin family had broken the engagement and was marrying off Li Qianqian, only to later find out that the stores they had bought were no longer valid. The Gubei Marquis was shaking with anger. You broke the engagement for this person. Now look, she's married to the crown prince, and we can no longer climb up. You said she could make money, but now she hasn't made a penny. Instead, she's being fined by the yamen, and the shops are being returned. We've lost all face these days. Mrs. Qin scolded Qin Huaiyuan. Qin Huaiyuan kept his head lowered, saying nothing. He suddenly realized that the strength he had once admired in Yue Niang now only irritated him. Yue Niang said that one must live for oneself, and she was practicing what she preached. She didn't care for Qin Huaiyuan's parents, grabbing a kitchen knife and shouting at Mrs. Qin, scolding her loudly and crudely. A lady of noble birth like Mrs. Qin was no match for the fierce Li Qianqian, and she soon fell ill again from the stress. This time, Qin Huaiyuan had truly had enough of Yue Niang. On Qingming Day, I went out boating with Sui and Xiaomei, and from a distance, I saw Qin Huaiyuan waiting there. Jiao, may I speak with you for a moment? I gestured for him to continue, and he hesitated before speaking. Jiao, I've been deceived by Yue Niang. She seems like a completely different person now. I don't even recognize her anymore. I silently looked at him, saying nothing. Jiao, I heard you're going to marry the crown prince. Do you really like him? He only values you because of your status as the duke's legitimate daughter. He wants you to help him secure his position in the court. I still didn't speak. Qin Huaiyuan grew anxious. Jiao, I know you're still angry with me. You only agreed to Zhou Yi because you're trying to get back at me, right? You never liked him. I smiled inwardly, satisfied with his reaction. Your treasure has arrived, and I must go now. I gave him a glance behind him, and a look of disappointment flashed in Qin Huaiyuan's eyes. Just as Yue Niang had said that day at the flower banquet. When I arrived, she was already there. It was no surprise that Yue Niang would be driven out of the Marquis's house today. The next morning, Xiaomei was elated. Miss Li Qianqian went to the Eastern Palace last night. The crown prince refused to see her, and I heard she cried outside the palace gates for a long time, saying the crown prince had betrayed her. Zhao Mama shook her head, lamenting. This woman has gone mad. She dares to say anything. So she was brought into the Eastern Palace, and the maid who escorted her said that she had been repeatedly disrespectful to the crown prince. Xiaomei added, right now, the crown prince has sent a carriage to invite you to the Eastern Palace. When I arrived at the Eastern Palace, Li Qianqian was tied to a pillar, 2 maids standing watch over her. I've publicly declared that she has committed an offense against the crown prince, slandering him. She has been punished and will serve as a palace maid cleaning the imperial chambers, Zhou Yi added. I dismissed the maids and coldly stared at her, saying nothing, until she felt a chill run down her spine. Tao Jiao, what do you intend to do to me? I am the legitimate wife of the Gubei Marquis's house. You don't dare touch me. Is that so? But I heard your belongings have already been thrown out of the Marquis's house, I said flatly. Li Qianqian turned her face away, refusing to speak. You came from the 21st century, didn't you? You want to change our times and become the woman who controls everything here. It's a pity, though. You think too highly of yourself. I said with a light laugh. She looked shocked. How do you know? Li Qianqi, you've overestimated yourself. I've been learning for so many years. If I couldn't even surpass someone like you, who only knows a few poems and nothing else, then I, a legitimate daughter of a noble house, would be unworthy. She was even more shocked. How do you know my name? You don't need to know. You only need to understand that today is your day of death. I'm going to kill you to avenge my Yue Niang. But your body is mine now, so I can't ruin it. I'll take my time. With that, before she could scream, the maid had already covered her mouth, and a silver needle was driven into her neck. Scarlet liquid flowed out, and Li Qianqi struggled, but it was useless. Li Qianqi, do you know? You're not the only one who's come from another world, but the others have reached the pinnacle of power, while you, like a jumping clown, accomplish nothing and are ridiculed at every turn. You thought you could survive in your time, and thought that here, with a few poems and a few words, you could gain a position?
Dream on.
I saw the light in her eyes fade slowly. I didn't just want her dead. I wanted her to die in despair. She thought she could win the prince's favor and move up, but little did she know, ahead of her lay the hell she deserved. I gave her one last look. To try to surpass me in my time, such arrogance. Li Qianqi's blood slowly drained. She was fully conscious as she watched herself die, unable to break free. She had stayed inside Yue Niang's body for 10 years. The power, money, and status she craved, she was so close to obtaining them. Now they all went to waste, along with her blood. The Grand Tutor once said that if someone from another world doesn't end well in this one, their soul will disintegrate after death. I wanted Li Qianqi to completely disappear. Yue Niang's body was sent back to her hometown to be buried next to her biological mother. I sent people to guard their tomb to prevent the Luo family from stealing it. As for the Luo family, Yue Niang's father was found guilty of embezzlement and exiled, and her stepmother ran away with the children overnight. The remaining younger siblings were sent to a tutor to learn to read and write, hoping they could achieve something in the future. When I married Zhou Yi, there were celebrations all over the city, and fireworks went off for 3 days. I sat in the palanquin, listening to Zhao Mammy beside me chattering. "Miss, stop crying. Today is a great day, and if you cry too much, your eyes will look swollen." I looked at the wedding veil in my hand, embroidered with fine stitches by Sui. She had said, "Cousin, just think of this as a gift from your elder sister." I used her embroidery frame to make it in her place. I almost felt Yue Niang's warmth, as though I could hear her saying, "Don't cry, Jiao. The wedding veil I gave you isn't for wiping away tears." Just as I wiped away the last of my tears, I heard Zhao Mammy scolding, "How dare you block the wedding palanquin of the princess consort? Jiao, please meet me for a moment. Let me say something." It was Qin Huayuan's voice. "Jiao, I was wrong. I regret it. It was all my fault. Please give me another chance." "Jiao, my happiest days were when we played chess, composed poems, drank tea, and played music together. I was sincere with you. He married you as a trap, only to use you." The voice gradually faded, perhaps as the guards dragged him away. Perhaps he truly regretted it. But I, Tao A Jiao, always walked the path ahead, never looking back. A few days later, I learned that after Qin Huayuan was dragged away by the guards, he received news of Yue Niang's death. He wandered around, holding on to the things I had returned to him, crying and laughing at the places we had once visited. Everyone said that the Duke of Gubei's title would likely be inherited by his illegitimate son. After all, how could a madman become a first-rank noble? In the Eastern Palace, Zhou Yi lifted the bridal veil and stared at me, stunned. "Jiao, you're so beautiful, more beautiful than the fireworks that filled the sky that day." Zhou Yi tightly hugged me, as if afraid I would disappear in the next moment. "Jiao, I heard that Qin Huayuan stopped your palanquin today. He said he regretted it." Zhou Yi's voice was tinged with jealousy. I nestled in his arms and nodded gently. "Do you regret it?" he asked softly. I nodded again, a little. The light in Zhou Yi's eyes dimmed. "I regret being blind at the beginning, not being with you sooner. But the days ahead are still long, and we can take our time." Zhou Yi's eyes brightened again, brighter than when he walked through the snowstorm to the flowing fragrance pavilion to see me.
Jiao.
At the end of the month, I'll take you to Yue Hang to see the traces of me missing you for those 3 years. All right. The end of the story. Extra, Zhou Yi's perspective. I am the crown prince, and from a young age, I've had everything I wanted and nothing I couldn't get. Except for Jiao. She was the first person to reject me. When my grandmother wanted to betroth her to me, Jiao cried and wiped her tears, and my grandmother had to give up. But Jiao is beautiful, and even though she rejected me, I wasn't angry. As long as I could see her, I was happy. But not long after, Qin Huayuan appeared, and he took Jiao's heart. From then on, Jiao didn't visit the palace much. I asked Jiao why she ignored me, and she said I was too spoiled and that she didn't like it. My grandmother said that Ajiao grew up at the border, where conditions were poor. Although she was a daughter, she couldn't be pampered, so she was named Ajiao in the hope that, when she grew up, the winds and sands of the border would show her some mercy and allow her to remain delicate. I didn't even have the chance to tell Ajiao that I could change. Before I could, she had already signed the marriage contract with that brat, Qin Huaiyuan. I ran to the grand tutor's house and cried. The grand tutor hit my back with a stick. A man should not cry. If she thinks you're too spoiled, crying won't help. You need to change. So, the grand tutor took me to Yue Niang, where we settled by the mountains and water. Every day I read, practiced martial arts, and meditated. The grand tutor was very strict. In summer, even when mosquitoes bit me and left dozens of welts, the grand tutor wouldn't let me move. At first, I couldn't bear it, but later I just kept thinking of Ajiao. I told myself to bear with it, so Ajiao might look at me once more. Every morning, I practiced martial arts under the waterfall. When I couldn't practice anymore, I carved Ajiao's image on a large stone behind the waterfall, her eating almond pastries, her catching butterflies, and her smiling at me. The grand tutor found out and hit me again. He scolded me for being love-struck. I asked the grand tutor, "What's love-struck?" He snorted, "A brain that can be thrown away. Keeping it is a waste." The grand tutor never liked to talk about his past. He was cold to everyone, but very kind to me. I was one of the few people who knew his secret. The grand tutor was immortal. Time seemed to leave no mark on his face. This was very similar to my grandmother. My grandmother didn't look old either, but she would always wake up early to draw wrinkles on her forehead. Later, after being scolded for being love-struck many times, the grand tutor started telling me his story. He said he had someone he loved very much. He followed her here, but when he found her, she had already married someone else, a person he could never fight against. I asked who that person was, but he didn't say. He just hit me with his stick and told me to focus on practicing martial arts, not to think about this or that. Ajiao has already signed a marriage contract. Can she still break it? The grand tutor's words were prophetic. Ajiao really did break the marriage contract. I had planned to rush back for Ajiao's coming-of-age ceremony, but when I reached the capital, I heard about the broken engagement. I admit I was narrow-minded. I was so happy I finally had a chance. I had the national master paint a picture for me on white jade, and I was going to give it to Ajiao. I wanted her to see it outside, and I wanted Qin Huaiyuan to see that Ajiao deserved to be noticed. I went to ask my father for permission to let Ajiao use Lufeng Pavilion. My father wanted me to give up, so he looked outside at the snow and said, "If you can kneel for an hour, I will allow it." I was secretly delighted. It was too easy. After 3 years, the grand tutor had trained me well. An hour later, my father, with a complex expression, finally agreed. After the coming-of-age ceremony, no one dared to talk about Ajiao anymore. But Ajiao still wasn't happy. I used the excuse of investigating a case to visit her, hoping to get closer, and she immediately agreed. Watching Ajiao comfort the soldiers' families and calmly reason with Yue Niang, I realized for the first time that Ajiao was right to be disgusted by my past self. At the same time, I secretly felt relieved. Thankfully, I had changed. Ajiao seemed to have mixed feelings about Yue Niang. She was angry, but I could see that she couldn't bear it. But I couldn't be merciful. When Yue Niang insulted Ajiao as a ruined woman, I really wanted to pierce her heart with an arrow. My Ajiao is the bright moon, a treasure, the best girl in the world. I wouldn't allow her to be humiliated like that, so I had people beat Yue Niang up. Every time there was a cloudy day, she would suffer intense pain. She deserved it. Ajiao cared about Yue Niang, so I went to ask the grand tutor. He listened and immediately concluded, "Yue Niang is dead." I usually trusted the grand tutor, but I didn't want to believe it. However, after working on it for a night, I realized he was right. I didn't know how to face Ajiao. As I was worrying, Ajiao came. I thought I should tell her. It was only a matter of time before she would have to face it. But once I said it, I regretted it. I saw Ajiao temporarily lose her sight due to the shock, and when she cried, I was so angry at myself, I wanted to slap myself twice. When I held Ajiao, she spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted. I panicked completely. I was terrified Ajiao might get hurt. If anything happened to her, I couldn't live on. The grand tutor told me to sleep for a while, but I wasn't tired. I just wanted to stay with her. Finally, Ajiao woke up, and I was able to relax. Ajiao locked herself in her room, and every day I went to the Duke's house. If I couldn't see her, I nearly broke down. Then one day she came out. She said she wanted to avenge Yue Niang. I invited everyone to the snow garden for a play. I watched the fake Yue Niang perform in front of me. Every time our eyes met, I wanted to blind her, but Ajiao said that the fake Yue Niang had already been dealt with. She was someone the Duke of Gubei had backed, so there was no reason to remove her until the Duke no longer needed her. So, I had to endure the disgust and continue the act. After a few more performances, Yue Niang was finally kicked out. But at the same time, Qin Huaiyuan couldn't sit still anymore. He regretted it. Of course, he would regret it. Only a fool would give up someone like Ajiao. But it was too late for regret. Ajiao had already promised me. She would be my princess in the future. No matter how much Qin Huaiyuan regretted it, he could never have Ajiao's heart. On our wedding day, I held Ajiao tight. I could hardly believe it was real. Until Ajiao said, "If we have a daughter in the future, can we name her Yue?" I quickly nodded, yes. Ajiao tightly hugged my neck and kissed me. Only then did I realize it wasn't a dream. It was real. I really married my little Ajiao. A year later, our child was born. When Ajiao saw the child, she cried. She said the birthmark on Yue's collarbone was identical to Yue Niang's. Sui came to see the child, and Yue immediately hugged her and wouldn't let go. Ajiao nestled in my arms and said, "I know, Yue Niang has come back. Thanks to Yue. Thanks to Yue Niang." My Ajiao was happy again. The end.